to our next speaker, Andrew Strause. Andrew is a co-founder and the CEO of Navengage, a technology company that works to open doors for students through experiential learning. He graduated in 2017 with a degree in Management Information Systems from the Smeal College of Business, where he also worked as a major gift officer. As a student, Andrew was a 2-year Thon captain, a brother of the co-ed business fraternity Delta Sigma Pi, and a 2-time national team member of Club Swim. Andrew's speech explores how we can support our friends in their unique journeys through college, so please give it up for Andrew.
I loved Penn State. I loved everything about my experience, and as you just heard, I got involved in a lot of different things here. There were so many people to meet, there were so many organizations to join, and honestly, I couldn't imagine anybody not loving their 4 years here. And that all kind of ended when I was taking graduation photos with one of my best friends who's an introvert, and he opened up to me that he didn't have that same experience. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about extroverts and introverts and how they might experience something like Penn State, and what we can do to help maybe more of our introverted friends, as well as what introversion and extroversion really means. The first thing to understand is it's really a spectrum. So it's not just these introverts and these extroverts, but everybody falls somewhere on this line. I'm actually only a little bit extroverted, and my friend is very much introverted. And that's important to know because as we're moving through some of these spaces, introverts might take that time to recharge on their own, but somebody closer to the middle of the spectrum might get that energy from friends, might get that energy by themselves. The other thing that's important to know is this is really one of my best friends. His name's Connor. He's an introvert, but I think it's really important for you to understand what that relationship looked like and how well I did know Connor. Connor was one of the 2 people I wanted to take grad photos with. He's been one of my best friends growing up, and it was instant for me once I decided I wanted to take grad photos that would be with Connor and Nate. We were weird kids. I knew Connor growing up basically from the age of 10. We swam together, we played soccer together, and we were also in a lot of the same groups. I knew who this kid was, and we grew up in a small agricultural community where we had maybe fewer relationships, but deeper relationships as well. And we were also a team. So it was really the 6 of us against the world. We were all there in Connor's wedding, and we will come back to this later, but essentially there's a reason why we all stuck together through this entire time. And there's a reason why after this presentation, I'm probably gonna have 20 texts from my best friends, and we'll have 20 more tomorrow morning. I love Penn State. When we were going to take these grad photos, I was incredibly sad to have to leave this place. I wanted to stay another 4 years. I did pretty much everything I could, as well as working at the university after graduation. And I found out that was a unique experience. Connor pulled Nate and I aside and basically said, guys, I'd like to thank you for the 1 or 2 times that we hung out every month. That was the extent of my social interaction. Those were the main relationships that I built at Penn State. I didn't really know much beyond those friendships. That was one of the worst thank yous I've ever received. And honestly, it's one of the things I still struggle with today and trying to fix this problem to make sure students don't go through those 4 years that Connor went through. So I want to talk about some of the traits of an extrovert and why this caught me off guard. Extroverts are interested in what's going on. They're very talkative. They like action. They like initiative. They say what they think. If I have a problem, you will know about it in about 5 seconds. They're interested in new people. They easily make friends and adapt to a new group, and they get energy from being around others. Penn State was naturally a place where I thrived because I constantly met people every day, and every time I'd walk down College Avenue, I'd see about 60 of them before I could get to my house. My experience started off with Club Swim, and I had great mentors. I made about 200 different friends in the organization. I joined Delta Sigma Pi. I had another 100 friends. I learned people who were in my class from the get-go. I had all of them my sophomore year, junior year, senior year. I joined Lunar Lion, and I met different engineers who were in different majors. I took a 400 level theater class where I was completely out of my element and had an opportunity to feel what it's like to be on the other side of the table and to have everybody looking to me about different questions in class. I was a 2-year Thon captain, and I expanded what my purpose was. I found that there were Thon families that I could serve, and there was something much bigger than myself at Penn State that I could do with my time. And I had about 600 friends. I talked to Connor about what we were defining as friends for this presentation, and what we came up with was that friends are people who know your name and you know theirs. And now I want to talk a little bit about introverts. They work well alone, and they're independent. and these are general topics. Again, remember, it's a spectrum. They're interested in their own thoughts. They're very introspective and they're deep thinkers. They often appear reserved or quiet to those who might be extroverted. They do not like unexpected visits. They need time to recharge. That's really the time where they can gain their energy. And they prefer to have a few well-known friends. This was Connor's experience. During summer session, I joined LEAP, and Connor did not do LEAP. He took 2 classes. I immediately made some friends in that group. One of them I'm going to their wedding this year. And again, Connor was just kind of going through those motions to start off his Penn State experience. He didn't get close with his hallmates, and as he described it to me, he didn't want to build those surface level relationships. He really only wanted to focus on the deep relationships that he knew were going to stand the test of time. He came along when he was invited. I think that's a really important thing. When we think about extroverts and introverts are trying, and if they're welcomed along, they will come. Connor came to pretty much every IM soccer game that we had, and again, that was probably part of that social interaction that he was thanking Nate and I for. He had a tough major, electrical engineering. I was management information systems, and I had a little bit more time to do some of those activities, but I think it's important as well that we put that aside, that some students at Penn State don't have as much time to get involved. And then he met friends in his major after 2 years, and this is where Connor opened up to me and said, after 2 years, he had about 15 people that knew his name, and he knew theirs. Nate and I were 2 of that 15. And once he knew the students in his major, that went up to 30. This is club swimming. This is actually just club swimming that woke up at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning to take a photo. These are 60 of the 200 people that I might have interacted with in a given year. And just the people who showed up with this photo was double the amount that Connor said knew his name and he knew theirs. And I've actually dedicated my life and my 9 to 5 essentially on trying to solve this problem. I work in a company called Navengage, and we're really trying to figure out how students like Connor can get involved in their own terms. And I want to put the shameless plug out there and talk a little bit about that before I get back into the story. So there's something called HIPS, High Impact Practices at Penn State, and also every higher ed institution. And they're basically things that we know when students get involved in them, they have higher GPAs, they're more likely to be happy, they're more likely to be successful during their time. And these things are first year seminar or LEAP. These are research, education abroad, student orgs, internships, work experiences, community-based or service learning opportunities, and really anything outside the classroom that's not a lecture and it's not a book, but you expect it from Penn State. This is Connor and I mapped out, and basically we had a very similar resume when you think about, LEAP was different, sure, but we didn't go abroad, we both had internships, and neither of us did research. It really came into more of the human interaction. And this is where I think Penn State's going to lead across the country of how we start to think about some of these relationships. I was in 8 organizations, Connor was in 1. I had 5 leadership roles, Connor didn't have any. Impact classes. And as I mentioned that theater class before, getting out of my comfort zone and having an intimate group kind of have hard conversations. That was a women in theater class, and it was also during 2016. So as you can imagine, we had a very interesting day where I got to basically defend what was going on in the country and have a conversation about how we got to this point. And then connections. Again, I think that's a conservative number. There were probably 600 people by the time I graduated who knew my name and I knew theirs. And again, Connor had about 30 that were close friends, but again, when he's walking on College Avenue, he's not having the same experience that I was, even though we're in the same place. So Connor's experience, let's say in 5 years at Penn State, would have been completely different. Ideally, he can tell the app what he wants. He can be connected on his own terms when he wants to recharge and come back and get involved in an organization. He can skip those surface level relationships and really find some of that content that he wants to interact with. He can be independent when he's managing his time. He can connect with others who feel the same way that he might be feeling and get together with some of those groups. And Connor actually helped us design the app. So the way I was thinking about the app before was, do you want to join an organization? And Connor quickly mentioned to us, this just being one example, that he wanted to join an organization of 10 people. He didn't want to go to the involvement fair and be yelled at by 1,000 student leaders. He also didn't want to walk into a thon organization where there were 300 people in the room. And that made sense. He wanted to build those deep relationships, but because that wasn't my experience, that wasn't the way I was thinking about the problem. And the funny thing was, as soon as Connor came forward with that, and we asked other students, almost all of them unanimously said, that's the experience I felt. I don't want to walk into those rooms. How can I find those small organizations? which can also benefit from those students being involved. I want to talk a little bit about Gen Z, and this is mostly positive, but there's a couple things that are also challenges that maybe I didn't have to deal with 5 years ago when I graduated. Being used to connecting online is really great, and my niece actually just moved recently, and I saw that she stayed in contact with some of our friends from her hometown. That made it a little bit harder to get connected with some of the new students at her school. A lot of students who are going from high school to college and traditional education might experience that same thing, and that means all that time dedicated to maintaining those relationships from high school might take away from the opportunity to get connected to new friends in college. You're also more connected than a lot of previous generations because you're staying in touch with more people and you don't have that restriction of being in touch with people in your own space. But also a little less connected with those surroundings, as I mentioned before. Having high expectations for what you should do and what your responsibility is, and being more likely to talk about mental health and getting the word out there about how you're feeling. The last part is being the most anxious. So when we ask students how they're feeling, they feel more anxious than previous generations. Those expectations are high, and it's really hard to get involved, especially when there's so many things going on in college. When you're an introvert, maybe having 1,000 student organizations doesn't mean a whole lot because you're really looking for the one where you're going to build those relationships. And I have good news for anybody who might feel like Connor did during his 4 years, or even if you've only felt like that for a couple of years. It does get better. And we also can play a role in helping those students, but we all feel that way at some point, and every student I've talked to has said, either the first week, the first month, the first semester, they felt alone at some point. Connor's doing really well. As you saw earlier, we were all involved in his wedding. He has a little girl now, and he lives in Pittsburgh. He also worked on Uber's ATG program that recently got bought out. And I want to talk about why this is important and why this is our problem. It's not just Connor's problem to figure these things out, it's also the extroverts that can really help Connor and lend a hand. And we really need to be aware of what's going on with our friends. Specifically, why introverts make great friends is because they go deep, it's because they listen, it's because they're loyal, and it's because they're present. Connor is actually the reason why these 4 individuals in this group were a part of his wedding, that he brought us together. He's the one who initiates conversations in our group, and he's really the reason why we've all stayed together as friends since we were 10 until we're 27. Having those introverts in your life can bring you together. It's really important to remember where they're at when they might be struggling, how you can help them. So a couple check-ins. You need to check in on your friends. Please don't end up like I did and find out after graduation that your friend was feeling that way. Just ask them, how are you feeling, and be inquisitive. Check in on yourself. Again, everybody is feeling that way, and one observation that I'm having with Gen Z is nobody really wants to admit that. It's really important that you admit how you're feeling, and you can get the resources that you might need. Ask for help when you're in that position. And assume everybody is going through something, because they are. There's something on everybody's mind, and it's really important to take the time and ask them how they're feeling, and really to make sure that you're a good friend, you're being there for them. Especially if you're a little bit more extroverted, make sure that you're bringing that person along with you. Thank you again, and I encourage you to download the Penn State Engagement app and learn more about how you can get involved and help out the introvert in your life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew.